back. I've just been told we've had 30,000 calls so far, all voting, I hope. Anyway, as I said at the start of the programme, the majority of UFO sightings are explainable. But the one we're about to look at, known as the Rendlesham Forest incident, is the best documented and the most baffling UFO landing in Britain. 17 years after it took place, skeptics and ufologists are as divided as ever. Bentwaters and Woodbridge, twin military air bases in East Anglia. The 3 miles that divide them are filled by Rendlesham Forest. Until last year, the bases were occupied by the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing of the United States Air Force. Although a normally uneventful assignment, they formed a strategic part of Western Europe's defences. As such, they had top security status. Nothing could get in or out without being detected. In December 1980, at Woodbridge Base, Airman John Burroughs was on security patrol with a colleague.
Do you see that in the woods?
There were strange lights out in the forest. To me, it almost looked like Christmas lights at first, a Christmas display.
I'll open the gate.
At that point, we looked at each other and we decided that we better go out and take a closer look because we weren't sure what we were dealing with. What we were looking at wasn't real.
Those are no Christmas lights. Come on, let's get out of here.
Airman Burroughs and his colleague raced back to the gatehouse, where he contacted the security controller.
Roger, Control, we're on our way over.
I received a call from the control center to go on down to the east gate and contact John Burroughs. And I asked him what was the nature of the problem down there. And they said that they'd rather not tell me. They'd rather have me go down there and talk to the patrolman on scene.
What is that?
I don't know, and I don't want to know.
Did you hear an explosion, John?
It didn't crash, it landed.
Whatever it was, Sergeant Penniston knew they had to go and find out.
I got permission to proceed off base to investigate.
Following military rules, the Americans had to leave their weapons behind.
One part of me wanted to go ahead and go out there and figure out what we were dealing with, and the other part of me was saying, no, you don't need to go out there, just go ahead, stay back at the gate where it's safe and you don't have to worry about what's going on.
The men went through the forest towards the lights.
This is as far as we go. It's out on foot now.
I started to see a defined shape, and at that point is when I realized it wasn't an aircraft crash, a fire, or anything of that sort. The air was filled with electricity that you could feel it on your skin as we approached the object.
You felt like you were moving in slow motion. Your hair on the back of your head was standing up. You felt like you had very little control over your body.
Then they saw it.
I wish I had my weapon because I felt totally defenseless.
It was about the size of a tank. It was triangular in shape. Underneath the craft was a high-intensity white light emanating out of it, and it was bordered by red and blue lighting, alternating.
When nothing happened, the men, deciding the object wasn't hostile, got up to take a closer look.
On the upper left side of the craft was an inscription that measured 6 inches high of symbols. They looked familiar, but I couldn't ascertain why.
The Americans watched for about 20 minutes.
And slowly started moving back, weaving in and around the trees. Got about 40 feet away, then it raised up into the air, and it shot off as fast as you can blink.
The next morning, the airmen went back to the scene to investigate.
We found branches on the ground. We found indentations in the ground.
Then they remembered that the object they had seen was triangular. They measured the distance between the indentations and discovered that they formed an equilateral triangle. The activities soon came to the attention of the Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt.
I was sure something had happened. There was obviously something. I certainly wasn't convinced it was a UFO, but I didn't know what it was.
There was only one way to find out. Huge portable floodlights, known as light-alls, were rigged in the forest, ready for anything which might appear the next night. But as darkness fell, the light-alls began to malfunction. Lieutenant Colonel Holt was interrupted at a Christmas dinner.
The duty flight lieutenant came in, and he was quite shaken and insisted upon speaking myself and the base commander about a matter of utmost urgency. He said, "It's back." And I said, "What's back?" And he said, "The UFO is back." I assembled a small team of experts, and we set off in the forest really to debunk it.
About 30 men followed the lights into the forest, armed with special equipment, including a night vision scope, Geiger counter, and a tape recorder.
Right, this way.
I'm certainly glad we made the tape, because if we hadn't made the tape, even I would have trouble believing what happened that night.
But would anyone else believe them?
Right, this way.
It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been.
Yeah.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
I knew there was something there. There had to be something there. But I also was firmly convinced there was a logical explanation for what was going on. It's very unusual to have a problem with a light-all. That night, the light-alls wouldn't work, even when they swapped out and got other ones from the base. In addition, we had problems with our radios. All 3 frequencies we were using were intermittent and did not work properly that night.
But other equipment was working. A night vision scope, a Geiger counter, and a tape recorder. The sound in this reconstruction is taken from the actual tape they claim to have recorded that night.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead.
And it's yellow.
I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been.
Yellow.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
It pulsated as though it were an eye winking at you. And around the edges, it appeared to have molten metal dripping off it, just like falling to the ground. But I didn't see any evidence of anything on the ground. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. Here I am, a senior official that routinely denies this sort of thing and diligently works to debunk them, and I'm involved in the middle of something that I can't explain.
The Geiger counter was measuring levels 10 times normal background radiation.
Just jumped up to 7/10 there.
7/10 right there in the center?
Uh-huh.
I'm getting very positive readings. You're getting readings on the tree you're taking samples from?
Where clicks, Max.
That's the strongest point on the tree?
Yes, sir.
The object suddenly exploded, a silent explosion, and broke into 3 to 5 white objects and rapidly disappeared.
A mile away, Airman John Burroughs was with the broken-down light-alls.
All of a sudden, out of the distance, a blue light streaked past us. Passing the light-alls, they came on. It passed through the open window on the truck, going off into the distance, and the light-alls went out.
As we moved out of the forest, we noticed 3 objects in the sky. The objects in the sky were moving about, sharp, angular movements, very high speed.
It's as if it's looking for something.
I kept getting on the radio and calling the command post.
Thunder, this is Stopper. Call radar and ask them what they've got 30 degrees above the horizon and 10 miles out.
I wanted to know if they were finding anything on the radar scope. One of the objects in the sky was sending down beams of light, beams of energy. I'm not sure what they were. But at the same time, I could hear on the radio voices talking about the beams coming down on the base.
Then a beam shone straight at them.
At this stage, my skepticism had definitely disappeared. I was really in awe.
Almost as rapidly as it appeared, it went. So, what really did happen in Rendlesham Forest that night? Ian Ridpath, journalist and a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, dismisses Colonel Holt's account, and tonight he offers his own theory. Ian Ridpath. Ian, you believe that the Rendlesham landing wasn't a UFO landing at all?
No, I don't. I was intrigued by this case because it seems to be that irrefutable evidence that we were talking about earlier, and it's backed up by the word of Colonel Charles Holt and written documentary evidence. But if you look at the different aspects of the case, you can find that there are perhaps many different things which have been lumped together to make the whole thing seem more mysterious than it really is. Now, to start with, the light they saw at 3 o'clock in the morning, apparently falling, something crashing into the forest, I discovered there was a bright fireball, a natural piece of space debris burning up in the atmosphere at exactly that time. I think that's probably what they saw. Then the men went out into the forest. They saw this flashing white light. They said it seemed to illuminate the forest with a white light. Now, someone had called the police. The local police came and took a look. They searched the area. They couldn't find anything. They said the lights were the Orford Ness Lighthouse. Now, I should explain about the Orford Ness Lighthouse because this comes up quite a lot in the case. The Orford Ness Lighthouse sits on the coast at Orford, about 5 miles away from where they were in the forest. And it appears very much closer when you're in the forest at night. It's a very bright light. It flashes away, and because of the way the land falls towards the coast, it looks as though it hovers just above ground level, and as you move about, the thing seems to move about too. Now, the following morning, as we saw on the film, the men went out into the forest again. They saw what they claimed were landing marks. They were only very small. They're only about 1.5 inches deep, only about the size of your hand. This seems quite small for something maybe the size of a tank, which is supposed to come from interstellar space, land on 3 little tripod legs. The police were called out again. They said to us, that looks like the marks of an animal. Now, the local forester also saw all those marks. He was quite sure that they were just rabbit scrapings.
I think he's here, isn't he? Vince Thurkettle, you're here? Yeah. And was that your opinion?
It certainly was, yeah.
That it was simply...
I mean, I was really excited when the rumours started going, and I've been consistently disappointed as each piece of evidence comes up.
Can we just, Vince, while you're there, I mean, could a thing the size of the tank that they described on the film have actually moved through those trees?
Well, over the years, the 17 years, the opinion keeps changing. The craft was 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. I mean, the trees are actually 10 to 15 feet apart. So it's almost like the story has changed to fit the site.
Can I ask Nick Pope about the radiation readings? Because we reported in the film, were very high.
That's right. I mean, all these theories about lighthouses, and I've heard it said that the triangular indentations in the forest floor were due to rabbits. Well, they must be radioactive rabbits, because I checked these out with the Defence Radiological Protection Service when I was working at Secretariat Air Staff in the MOD, and they certainly did confirm to me, yes, of course, there's background radiation everywhere. We wanted to make sure it wasn't that, and it was indeed 10 times normal. So the lighthouse theory, clever though it is, I'm afraid just doesn't work.
Frank Close, how do you explain this radiation?
Well, the radiation is unusual because it's for a rare occasion we've at last got something you can go and check. And so I did. And what I did, I've got hold of, this is the British equivalent of the standard US Air Force issue, which is used usually for measuring huge amounts of radiation, like in nuclear blasts and so forth. All you need to notice is there's a dial on the front here, and it looks very much like the speedo in your car. Now, the speedo in your car is great for measuring whether you're exceeding the speed limit or not, but you know what it's like. You're stuck in the traffic jam doing nothing, but it's still flickering at the bottom. We know from the report that Colonel Holt made at the time that the amount of radiation they thought they were detecting on their machine was very, very small, 0.1. And we've checked with the makers of the US equivalent, and they said, their quote is, that this measurement was the bottom reading of the machine and was of little or no significance at all. So it was not possible with the device to measure that small amount. But what I have got here is something that you could have done, and it's this, and it shows the other thing, which is, even if the radiation was 10 times bigger, it doesn't matter very much at all. Look. In the room, can you hear the Geiger counters going off already? Because there's radiation all around us. Here I've got some rock that you can find lying around if you live in Cornwall all over the place. It's pitch blende. And that sends it up 100 times. Sending radiation backgrounds up by a factor of 10 means nothing at all.
Thank you very much. That was impressive. Ian Ridpath, thank you very much for being with us. I think it was vastly overstated, however. Stanton Friedman says we overstated that, but there are more arguments to come. We've heard a few, but now let us hear from the man who was there that night, Colonel Chuck Holt. Now, Colonel Hall, you've heard these various comments and explanations. 17 years ago, do you still hold to your story?
I certainly do, and I'd like to make a couple of comments. One, the story, so to speak, as far as the size and shape has not changed through the years. I took original statements from the 3 people that actually approached the object and did it a day afterwards, and they all said the same thing when they were independently interviewed, and they all said it was approximately 9 feet on a side and it was triangular. They have not changed that story. Now, many other people have come forward that supposedly were there, that I questioned, but we won't get into that, and said lots of various and sundry things, but those 3 people have said the same thing consistently and do to this day. Also, the indentations in the forest, I have in my hotel room a castor plast for one of those indentations, and there are other ones made. There were 3 made, and they are not an inch, they are approximately 3.5 inches, and they're consistent in diameter, approximately 14 to 15 inches.
And it was an equilateral triangle.
Equilateral triangle. And as far as your radiation, the machine we used was calibrated. Yes, it was on the low range. And we went around the forest. And that area, that specific area was hottest in the center of the triangle. The rest of the forest was cold, so to speak, nothing but background radiation. I was not alarmed. I'll admit it was a minimal amount, but it was certainly above background radiation. And that's something we can never settle, I realize.
Can I just question you on one thing, sir, because you did make a testimony at the time, and being at the time is perhaps the most important thing. And you said that the depressions were 1.5 inches deep. You've just now said they were much bigger than that. Now,
I have the plaster cast.
So was your original statement wrong?
I have the plaster cast, and you can see the plaster cast. I wish I had brought it this evening.
Yes, I wish you had. That's a nice thought.
It would have been nice to hear.
Penny has someone in the audience who has a view on this, haven't you, Penny?
I do indeed, yes. Jenny Randalls was one of the original investigators at Rendlesham and has actually visited the site. What do you think happened?
Well, I've been following this case all over the world, tracking down evidence for 17 years, and I've absolutely no doubt that these airmen did see something quite extraordinary in the forest. However, it's enormously complicated by the fact that on Orford Ness Island, apart from the lighthouse, the National Security Agency, that's the NSA, one of America's most secret intelligence agencies, were carrying out an extraordinary experiment. Officially, it was an over-the-horizon radar test. That's to try and detect aircraft from lots and lots of miles away. But some of this energy, we understand, leaked out into space. And we also know that there was a military satellite from the Soviet Union which was nuclear powered, which was decaying in its orbit that night, and it burned up over Rendlesham Forest, and it changed its orbital path as it did that in a quite extraordinary fashion. We suspect it's possible that some experiment was going on where they may have actually used this equipment to scramble the computers on board that Soviet satellite and may even have brought it down. Now, of course, if that's true, it gives you a reason, regardless of whether there were any aliens in Rendlesham Forest, why there could have been a massive cover-up. And I've seen...
So you're saying it's a military cover-up?
Well, I've seen many times the governments of the world use the UFO phenomenon as a kind of smokescreen. They hide their own tests of secret technology, knowing that if people see these things, they're going to report them as UFOs. And it's great they can get away with doing things in areas they normally wouldn't be able to.
OK, well, we're going to cover that a bit more later on in the programme. Michael?
Yes, we are. We shall come to that. But at the moment, Colonel Holt, it has been suggested a military cover-up. You were a military man. Were you part of that?
Definitely not, and I'd be willing to take a polygraph test on that. I can't say it wasn't. To the best of my knowledge, it wasn't, and I certainly was not a party to it, if there was something.
Can secrets be kept by the military?
Generally, but with some success, yes. But generally things come out over a period of time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Remember, if you've made up your mind on the big question, have aliens visited Earth, ring 0891 980 111 if it's yes, and 0891 980 222 if it's no. So, join us in a few minutes, if you will. Bye for now.